Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us meditate on the glorious effulgence of that Supreme Being who has created the universe. May she enlighten our hearts and direct our understanding. Please be seated. So just sort of carrying on from what we discussed a few weeks ago. Humanity, part of religion is that we observe the world in a way like science and try and sort of figure out patterns of how things operate. And one of the things that we have discovered is that suppose there is an action, there is a cause for something, we notice that there is a sequence of events which come after it. So, suppose you do any action, there will be a sequence of results. And those sequence of results in turn then go on to then become causes for other things to happen. And that is how the universe continues to rumble on. The causes become the effects, and then the effects become the causes, and the whole thing rumbles on in that way. And we call that the law of causation, the law of cause and effect. And we do this with lots of different rules that we've sort of developed or understood about the world. So we've got the law of causation, we've got the law of gravity, we've got the laws of motion, the laws of thermodynamics. We've got so many different laws which help us to get a handle on reality and try and give us some element of control over the world, which is otherwise out of control. But if you think about it, we call all these things the law of this, the law of that. But actually, the word law itself is a very sort of abstract term. It's something that humanity has created, like a box in which we can keep certain things, certain rules and regulations that we have noticed in the world. So law is quite an abstract thing, but it's something that we as human beings need in order to get a handle on the world around us. And we say that with the law of karma, for example, the law of causation, Hindus claim that the law of karma, the law of cause and effect, is a universal phenomenon. And when you think of the word universal, you think, surely that means anything and everything. You can't get much bigger than that. If a law is universal, surely there is not much more than that. But actually, Hindu philosophy is incredibly deep. And what it says is this universe of ours is only a tiny part of an infinite expanse called existence. So the universe is only a tiny part of this huge thing called existence, infinite thing. And when you look at the universe, you think, how do we define the universe then? We look to sort of modern cosmology, and modern cosmology defines the universe as that kind of thing which is encapsulated by the rules of space, time, and causation. And it's something that Hindu philosophy agrees with as well. And the Sanskrit words for that are desh, kar, nimit. Space, time, and causation are that which are encapsulated within the universe. And everything within the universe has to follow the rules of space, time, and causation. Anything from as giant as the solar system, the planets and the stars and the moons, they all have to follow the laws of the universe. All these centrifugal forces which are keeping the solar system in balance. And if these laws weren't there, everything would sort of fly apart from each other. There wouldn't even be a solar system to start with. Everything as giant as planets and stars to the smallest things. If you look at a plant has to also follow the laws of space, time, and causation. When a plant is growing, it has to seek out light, it has to seek out water. We are sort of compelled to follow the laws of the universe. All living things are forced or compelled to follow these rules. All living things must search out for heat and light and water and food. And if we don't, we pay a price, we suffer, we might die. So all of us are sort of compelled to follow the rules of the universe when we are in this universe. So everything is forced to follow these rules in this system. So then it follows that anything which is outside of this system, of this universe of ours, doesn't necessarily have to follow those laws. Perhaps it's a place of freedom where these laws no longer apply. So within the universe, everything is bound, everything must follow the laws, it's compelled to follow those laws. And everything which is outside the universe is perhaps a place of freedom. So the next sort of question which comes after that is that, well, what about this sort of philosophical hot potato, which is this question of free will? What is free will? It's something that has had philosophers scratching their heads for hundreds of years. What is the Hindu take on this concept of free will? So the Hindu take is, our will is everything that we know. And everything that we know is within this little universe of ours. And this little universe of ours is compelled to follow the laws of space, time, and causation. So actually the concept of free will is in itself a contradiction in terms, according to Hindu philosophy. You can't have a will that is free when it is within the confines of the universe and the laws of the universe. Because you think about it, every decision that you make, you think, I'm making it of my own free will. But actually, a lot of our decisions are conditioned by nature and nurture, by the way we've been brought up, the things that we've been exposed to, the friends that we talk to, the media that we're exposed to, our own characters, our own natures. So in a way, everything seems to be compelled to follow the rules of the universe. So this concept of free will, according to Hinduism, doesn't really exist. So what of this whole universe, what do we make of our concept of free will? Because we feel like we do have something called free will. We do feel that at every juncture of our life, we think, I can choose to do this or I can choose to do that. What is that thing? So that thing which is manifesting as the will or spirit comes from a place of freedom. But then when it is within the confines of the universe and the rules of the universe, it struggles against those rules. It struggles. We don't like being confined to the rules of the universe. And then ultimately we try and seek a way out. We try and seek a way back to that freedom. And if you think about it, you can think of yourself, a bit of a thought experiment. If you imagine yourself as a molecule of water, for example, and you are out in the free, open water, minding your own business. And then suddenly you come across a whirlpool and you are sucked into this whirlpool, this universe of ours, and you are compelled to follow the laws of the universe, this little whirlpool that we are sucked into. We have no choice. We have to go round and round in this whirlpool until eventually we kind of come out of that whirlpool to a place of freedom again. And that is the journey that all of us are going through. We come from this place of freedom. We get sucked into this whirlpool of the universe, and eventually we will hopefully someday come out of this whirlpool and again be free. And the thing is, it's one of those things, when you are within that whirlpool, you don't even realize that you are in this whirlpool, you are in this place, which is forcing your hand in every sort of juncture. Your hand is being forced. But in a way, humanity as a whole, we sort of try and sort of delude ourselves into thinking that actually, you know what, my life is okay, I am happy, everything seems to be working out for me, I'm quite happy with my existence. But actually, when you analyze it in this way, when you see yourself as being sort of trapped in this whirlpool, in this place where you're forced to do so many things, it makes you think that actually perhaps what we've developed as humanity is something called Stockholm Syndrome. Perhaps, this condition where you develop affection for the person who is your captor. Perhaps we have also developed this sort of Stockholm Syndrome for the universe. We start to develop an affection for the universe. We think everything is okay, everything is okay. You start to develop this attachment to the universe and you think my life is okay. But when you analyze your life, suppose, you've lived out your life, you're all still quite young, but suppose you live out your life and you analyze it. And how do you quantify the level of happiness and the level of sadness in your life? We can perhaps quantify it by looking at the amount of tears that you shed, for example. If you analyze the amount of tears that you shed in your entire life out of sadness, compared to the tears that you shed, perhaps of joy, of laughter, of happiness, the amount of tears that you shed out of sadness would probably fill buckets and buckets. And the amount of tears that you shed for happiness or joy, someone tells you something absolutely hilarious and it makes you laugh, you might be lucky to get a tiniest drop of water come out of your eye out of happiness. You'd be lucky if it filled a teaspoon in your entire life. The amount of buckets that you cry out of sadness compared to that tiny teaspoon of tears of joy that you might shed in your life give you some kind of an indication that perhaps this life is not as rosy as we like it to be, or we like to think of it to be. And when people think, oh, where would we like to be then if we are sort of trapped in this universe, they like to think of a heaven, perhaps, a heaven which is not too dissimilar to our existence that we've got here. Perhaps it's just a nicer version of our existence here. Everything, tastes nicer, everything feels nicer. But really, that's a very limited view of our world and our existence, because if a place like that did really exist, it would still be within the realms of the universe. It would still be compelled and bound by the laws of the universe. And why not wish to be completely free of all of these laws which are constricting us in every juncture of our life? Why not try and break free? And that's essentially, when you have that stirring within you, that is when you think, I must sort of escape from this place where everything is bound, everything is confined, everything is conditioned. I have had enough of this kind of an existence. And when you're that little molecule of water and you want to escape from this whirlpool, and you want to try and detach yourself from this whirlpool and again become free, that is the start of your spiritual journey. You may want to enjoy the world, keep enjoying the world, but a point will come when you think, you know what, I've had enough. I want to have an escape from all of this. And what does Hinduism say? When you have that sort of stirring within you, there are two approaches given within Hinduism. The first approach is an approach which is a very difficult path, a path which is followed by monks and sages and spiritual holy people. And that is the path of saying, okay, I've got certain desires in my life, but I would like to keep them in check. I will not follow my desires. I will hold on to them. My personality or my character is stronger than my desires. And they're able to walk away from their desires and live the life of a monk. But that is a very difficult path, and it's probably not suited for the vast majority of humanity. So what is the path which is suggested for us? What does Hinduism say? The path of that Hinduism says is that actually live out your desires. Do all the things that you want to, as long as it's legitimate desires. It's not going out there and murdering somebody or robbing a bank. As long as it's a legitimate desire, go out there and live it. And actually, two of the aims of Hindu life, one is artha, which means acquire wealth. Go out there, earn as much money as you can. If you want to get the biggest house on the street, go out and make sure you earn enough money and get the biggest house on the street, if that is what you desire. If you want to go on holiday to every country in the world, go out and do it. Earn enough money and go out and do it. Fulfill your desires, because if you don't go out there and fulfill your desires, if you bottle them up, it can actually become a very sort of unhealthy situation. Suppose you go on the strictest diet where you restrict yourself from eating any food, all of a sudden blank. Then you will not be able to stop thinking about food. Day and night you'll be thinking about food. You won't be able to think about anything else. So that's what Hinduism says, is that if you have these desires, go out there. Go and live those desires. Get them out of your system in a way. And eventually that maturity will arise within you, where you say, you know what? That level of happiness which I was expecting from this is actually not giving me the happiness that I was expecting. Suppose I wanted to go out and buy the biggest house. Good for me, I've gone and bought that biggest house. But then when I look at it, my mortgage bills are incredibly high, my gas and electric bills are incredibly high. I have to clean it every week, it's such a big job. So something which you thought of as an asset turns into a liability in a way. So you have to, in a way, live through it to kind of show yourself, look, I am not able to reach that level of happiness that I wanted to from these material things. And that is when, slowly and gradually, the shackles which are binding you to this world, the things that you are attached to, they will start to lose their grip over you. So you start to eventually realize that, you think I will get happiness by possessing this thing, possessing that thing, possessing this, extending my tentacles of selfishness and saying, I must possess this, I must possess that. And actually, say for example, you go out there and you buy a really expensive painting, for example, and one day that painting gets burnt in a fire, you would feel such tremendous pain, more so than if it was somebody else's painting, because you have attached yourself to that painting. So what Hindu philosophy says is that reach that level of maturity where you see every picture as not mine, just see it as being part of the universe and don't feel attached. Because when you try and find things to attach yourself to, rather than bringing you happiness, will actually ultimately bring you sadness and bring you misery, the more things that you attach yourself to. And that's probably why a lot of monks and sages, they try and restrict the amount of properties and possessions that they have, just to try and avoid that feeling of stress and pain which can come with possessing so many of these things. So yes, so this is two different pathways offered to humanity by Hinduism. The path where you can control your desires, which is probably not suited for the vast majority of humanity. Or there is the path where you think, let me just live out my desires, let me do everything that I've wanted to, and then ultimately realise that actually I am not as happy as I thought. And you may find that you go through lifetimes of, fulfilling your legitimate desires and going round and round the circle until eventually, maybe this lifetime, it may be 10 lifetimes away, where you actually start to realise that this is not the answer. This is not the answer to what I'm looking for, essentially. So the thing is, when people sort of progress on their spiritual journey, you find that there are two different groups of people. You get some people who, when they start to make spiritual progress, they start to sort of disappear into themselves. They start to sort of withdraw from everything in the world. They might sort of hide themselves in a cave or in their house. And because that experience, that spiritual experience that they've had, is so tremendously powerful, they no longer have any desire for creating a name for themselves or having their names emblazoned on the papers and saying, I've discovered this or I've discovered that. Their ego is completely sort of robbed away. And eventually they sort of melt into this place of freedom again. And throughout the history of humanity, who knows how many hundreds and thousands of individuals there may have been out there who have had this incredible spiritual journey, but don't have any ego or no desire to tell anybody about it, but they melt back into this place of freedom. And actually, if you think about it, you get individuals like the Buddha, for example, and the Buddha refers to himself as the 25th Buddha, the 25th enlightened person. What of the 24 who came before him? They are people who are unknown to history, unknown to humanity. But what these incredible individuals have done is they have laid the foundations of spirituality. I don't know if you remember, a few weeks ago we were discussing how thoughts are incredibly powerful. Every thought that you release, every thought that you think is released into the atmosphere in a bit like radio waves. And those radio waves sort of linger in the atmosphere, and they're sort of picked up by individuals who are on the same sort of wavelength as they are. In a way like how, if you're in a room full of musical instruments and you sort of hit one instrument, the other instruments start to resonate if they're at the same frequency. So we say the same is with thoughts. And individuals who release very powerful thoughts into the atmosphere, they are there, they are present in the atmosphere for eternity. These are incredibly powerful, heavyweight thoughts which can sort of, travel across the world, travel across the seas and reach individuals who are ripe for that spiritual knowledge and who can feel uplifted and carry that message forward. And that's why you get individuals like Buddha and Christ and all of these wonderful saints and sages you have in India who actually have picked up on the foundations laid by these silent, self-effacing individuals and trumpet it to the rest of the world. They say, look, rather than wandering around aimlessly in this scorching heat of the desert of the world, here is a cup of nectar. Here I'm showing you how to get there. Please go in this direction and it will help you on your journey. It will help you resolve your human condition. So it's absolutely wonderful. And if you think about it, if you look at all of the religions of the world, obviously you've got Buddhism, which was founded by Buddha, you've got Christianity, which was founded by Christ. When you look at Hinduism, you're like, what's going on there? The same logic doesn't apply. How do we even get the name Hinduism? How is that even follow? And the beautiful thing about Hinduism, some people misunderstand it. They say Hinduism doesn't have any founders. But how can it not have any founders? There must be some individuals who have founded it. So what we say in Hinduism is actually, Hinduism is built on the foundations laid by these silent, self-effacing individuals who have had the most powerful experiences, and they have released their thought waves into the atmosphere, and you get these individuals who are very sort of active by nature. They want to do something for the benefit of humanity, and they sort of channel these thoughts and present them to the rest of us to help guide us on our spiritual journey. So Hinduism actually has not just no founders, it has too many founders to count. It's very, very principle-based rather than personality-based. And you get these individuals, like I said, who want to sort of present this message of spirituality to the world. And in a way, it's a tremendous sort of sacrifice for them to cling on to their bodies, because once you have had this spiritual experience, it's such an incredibly powerful experience that it becomes a struggle to hang on to your physical body, because it's such a tremendous experience. You think, why should I hang on to this little body of mine? I want to merge back into that place of freedom. So for these individuals, it was absolutely like it was a struggle to keep their body. There was a personality who only lived about 100 years ago, a personality called Sri Ramakrishna, and he was immersed in spiritual experience for most of his life. And at mention of the name of God or spirituality, he would disappear into this spiritual experience. And it was a struggle for him to come back into his body. People had to offer him sips of water to try and sort of reconnect him back to his body. So the incredible depth, the incredible power of these individuals is something that we can't underestimate. And there's also actually another personality called Raman Maharshi, who also lived very recently. I think he only passed away in 1950. And he was such an enlightened individual. He'd completely lost connection with his physical body, to the point where at some point in his life, he had a cancerous lump in his arm. And rather than having to rely on anesthetic like normal people like we do, he was able to sit there and watch the doctors operate on his arm without feeling any pain, because he had completely disconnected himself from his physical body. So it's incredible, the power of spirituality. It's something that we underestimate. And it's something that, we can't really prove, but once you have actually done it yourself, that is the way that you can actually know that it is true. So yes, there are some incredible individuals throughout the history of humanity, spiritual individuals who melt into freedom, or who also like to tell the world about what they have discovered. So so it's a lot to sort of think about. Do you have any questions or anything? Yes.
The people who reach spiritual enlightenment, who don't try and go back to society, like you said, the sort of high decay, would you praise or criticize them? Because didn't you praise the people who, after reaching spiritual enlightenment, try and share the ways of Dharma?
Yes.
Would you not criticize those who
Yes, I completely understand what you're saying. Why should those people get the same level of credit as individuals who go out there and tell the world about these experiences? For sure. But like what I said earlier, they've released those thoughts into the atmosphere, into the environment, and it gets picked up by individuals like Buddhas and Christs, who are then able to build on those foundations. That's why we can't underestimate the power of what they have done. The power of thought is something that we can't underestimate. It's because it's not a physical thing, we can't physically prove it, but they have laid those foundations out there. And like a musical instruments that will sort of vibrate at the same frequency, those thought waves get picked up by individuals who are at the same spiritual level and say, yes, this makes so much sense. So those thoughts are out there. They have pushed those thoughts out to the rest of the world. So inadvertently, they have made an impact on humanity without the tops and tails of having my name out there. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a very great question. Any other questions? Yes.
So you talk about the idea of spirituality, but how would one sort of be able to connect? Like, because you were talking about how the guy disconnected from his body or something. How would one try to like focus on like oneself?
So how you would actually go about the process of becoming spiritually enlightened, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yes. So this is the beautiful thing. Within Hinduism, we've got so many different approaches of making spiritual progress, and they are actually all talked about in the Bhagavad Gita. There's 4 sort of main pathways that you can choose. You can pick and choose whichever pathway suits you and your temperament. So just very briefly, there's one pathway which is the path of devotion and love. So, we've got so many millions of gods and goddesses within Hinduism. If you love a particular one and develop a relationship of love with that particular form of God, you can make a tremendous amount of spiritual progress. What we've been talking about the last few weeks, this situation of karma yoga, doing good action, doing good work in the world. By doing good work, you're making spiritual progress. There is also the path of meditation, where you focus your mind completely on, discovering who you really are. It's a process of introspection. There are so many pathways which are sort of offered within Hinduism. And as I said, they're all built on the spiritual experience and knowledge of individuals, very powerful individuals. So you have the freedom within Hinduism. There's no set prescription. You follow the path that suits you. You can even mix and match the different pathways. You might love a bit of devotion. You might love to do good work in the world. Mix them together. You're welcome to do anything that suits you. If that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Really good questions. Anything else? Any other questions? Like, for example, the free will debate is always a big, hot potato. But I hope what Hinduism says about it makes sense, because, if you think about it, so much of what we think and what we do is sort of conditioned, and we have to try and get out of it. And that's essentially, that is the freest expression of our will, is trying to get out of this place of this prison, really, that we are all in. But yeah, so very interesting. Yes.
So are those enlightened people who like go away to cave or something? So when they die, obviously they don't get reincarnated again. So they ascend to be with God or something like that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, a very, very good question. What happens to these enlightened individuals? Well, Hinduism would say that once you have become enlightened, there is no longer a need for you to sort of be reborn. You sort of merge back into that freedom. You're no longer part of that whirlpool anymore. You just merge back into that spiritual experience. You merge back into spirit, essentially. But as I said, there are powerful individuals who may choose to come back to sort of present this message again to humanity, be reborn again and again to present this message. And you have to revere both sets of individuals for sure. Yes. Brilliant. Great. Any other questions? Anything that doesn't make sense? You don't have, like I said, you don't have to agree with anything that I said. You can think about it and disagree. Yes.
Similar to Sam's question, once you've been enlightened and you die, would you say do people sort of experience consciousness after being enlightened and sort of being waking up the universe?
So
it's still sort of conscious.
yes, no, I get what you're saying. So this is the thing, every individual is different. Suppose you have an individual who has got this powerful experience. They may choose to sort of not come back to their body. And that is totally okay, because it just feels so incredibly limiting after such a powerful experience to come back into your physical body. And they just sort of melt away in that sense. But then you get some individuals who do come back and they want to sort of share their experiences. So yeah, it depends on the individual. So yeah, lots to think about. But yeah, so I guess we can call it a day. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Free e-learning course in Hinduism. To register, please visit www.hindu-academy.com.
Talks on Hinduism. Sponsored by People Care. Encouraging caring for the elderly in their own homes. For more information, please visit peoplecare.com.